everyone. Thank you very much for coming to our presentation today. I'm Rachel Horowitz, and I'll be presenting on behalf of my co-authors and myself on our talk on community engagement and archaeological research in the Mopan Valley of Belize. Thanks. First, we'd like to start off by thanking the organizers of the conference. We're looking forward to all of the events over the next few days. So recent calls within archaeology to decolonize the discipline have often focused on diversifying the field and expanding on what is considered archaeological practice. Much of decolonial practices rely on public archaeology, both to expand opportunities for people to participate in the creation of archaeological knowledge through excavation and other activities, but also through providing information and activities to broader communities, particularly descendant groups and stakeholder communities. Today we're going to situate work by the Mopan Valley Archaeological Project, or MVAP, and the Mopan Valley Preclassic Project, or MVPP, directed by Drs. Kat Brown and Jason Yeager, within the broader history of community-engaged projects in the Maya region, and in Belize in particular, and highlight the work of a variety of project members in those endeavors. I really want to mention and emphasize that this is collaborative materials, and so everything we're talking about is very collaborative activities and due to a wide variety of people. So while community outreach and archaeology have been discussed among archaeologists broadly, work in the Maya region has sought to address these issues for many years, perhaps due to the early history of archaeology in the region and the colonial roots of that history. Community-engaged projects in the Yucatan Peninsula in particular have a long history, and while we're not going to list extensive numbers of examples here, perhaps the most prominent are the Inherit program run by the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Within Belize, scholars including Dr. Maxine Hollande and Drs. Leah McCurdy, Rebecca Friedel-Juan, and Jason Yeager, whom you'll all hear more about as their MVAP, MVPP project members, have discussed the complications of such work in Belize, where questions about descendant communities are often slightly more complex than in other areas. Thus, throughout this talk, we'll use the phrase stakeholder communities, so local residents always have a stakeholder relationship with local archaeological heritage, and so we can discuss those types of stakeholder communities. Furthermore, Sylvia Batty, who you see pictured here doing some of her research, and Antonio Bardal, who you heard present on his research earlier, have discussed and researched the history of community engagement in Belize and highlighted areas in which this engagement can be improved. And we'll return to some of their points and the information that they raised throughout the talk. You have probably already heard a little bit about the history of community-engaged archaeology in Belize, so we don't want to provide too many details here, but we did want to just mention and highlight some of the other projects within the country who are working on such things. So you just heard from Drs. Megan Paramanaki-Brown and Sean Morton about their work with the Stand Creek Archaeological Project. We also wanted to mention the Aventura Archaeological Project directed by Cynthia Robin, the Belize River East Archaeological Project directed by Dr. Ellie Harrison-Buck, who worked with the Crooked Tree community to found the Crooked Tree Museum and Cultural Heritage Center, and Dr. Annabelle Ford and her work with the Maya Forest Garden Project as highlights of such activities elsewhere in Belize. This is not an exhaustive list. There's plenty of other folks who are doing such work, but we just wanted to provide some examples of the variety of activities which are being performed by various archaeological groups in Belize. They all have, these projects have participated in wide-ranging and diverse sets of community-engaged activities, which help to inform the public about archaeology, as well as create closer connections between stakeholder groups and archaeologists. So here we'll address some of those activities that MVAP/MVPP have participated in, including hosting interns and volunteers, participation in archaeology fairs, other types of outreach, and the importance of longitudinal connections in communities. So we host Belizean students as interns and volunteers whenever possible. Having students from a variety of local institutions, whether as interns or volunteers, not only exposes those students to archaeology, but also contributes to broadening the types of people who participate in archaeology. Studies based in the U.S., most recently a piece by Laura Histow and Elizabeth Hannigan in 2020, pointed to the cost of participating in fieldwork and, in particular, paying for field schools as a barrier for entry into archaeology. While similar studies have not been necessarily performed outside of U.S.-based contexts, we can assume that financial barriers are similarly constraining in a Belizean context. by hosting students from Belize who have expressed an interest in archaeology as interns, they can gain exposure to archaeology without having to pay any fees associated with formal education costs. Furthermore, we work with interns to accommodate their schedules. For instance, they may work in the field with us 3 days a week as they are employed elsewhere, or have other commitments during other days of the week. We also work with students to provide transportation to sites, often situating them at sites where they're close to where they live. For example, many of the student interns that we've had in recent years have come from John Paul II Junior College in Benque, and so they've gone out to Arenal as we drive through Benque on our way to site and can easily pick the students up on the way. However, we do aim to get students a variety of experiences and thus have them participate in excavations at different sites and in the laboratory depending on their interests. While not all of our student interns have expressed an interest in continuing with archaeology after the field season, it is always better to know if one is interested than not have that opportunity, even if you decide after all that you're not interested in continuing. One of our recent interns, Doris, did go on to continue volunteering with the Institute of Archaeology after working with us in the field, so we were happy to be able to facilitate that connection and excited to see her continue at least for a little while and in being interested in archaeology. So in addition to student interns, we also have had volunteers from the community. So most recently, these have included Americans who are currently residing permanently in Belize. Their participation in the excavations provides an opportunity for these volunteers to become more familiar with the history of the region in which they now reside, but also to create connections with the local community through interactions with other people working on the project. So they might be interacting with and having exposure to people that they wouldn't have encountered in their daily lives in Belize otherwise. In addition to hosting these interns and volunteers, MVAP and MVPP project members have been instrumental in founding the Sukkot's Archaeology Fair, which was first held in 2015. And was held annually until COVID. While we did not hold the fair in 2022 due to trying to keep densities of people down due to COVID, we hope to return in subsequent years. The Sukkot's Archaeology Fair was first organized by then project members Dr. Leah McCurdy, who, along with Dr. Rebecca Frida Juan and Sylvia Batty, both of whom, of course, are hosts of this conference and founders of Heritage Education Network Belize, also founded the Fahina Archaeology Outreach Group, and you can see their logo here on the lower right-hand corner. Fahina's directors spearheaded the organization of the fair, which has since expanded to include many other projects and groups, and we're really excited to be part of such a collaborative project that brings together multiple different projects and organizations in order to bring archaeology to folks. So the Sukkot's Archaeology Day often provides not only opportunities for us to share our research and recent investigations with the community, but also to discuss archaeology more broadly, as well as to broaden and deepen connections with the community. One thing that Tony mentioned earlier, and what he talks about in his research more broadly, is that it's important to have foreign field school students, mostly from the United States, interact more with Belize and get a better sense of Belizean culture while they're participating in field schools. When we have field school students, they also always participate in the fair, and this is an important learning experience for them in terms of communicating about archaeology and science, but also important because it provides them with an opportunity to connect on a more personal level with some of the people whom they may have been working with in the field or in the lab on a daily basis. The fair is always a family affair, so it's a good time to meet people's families and children who you may have heard about during the field season, but not gotten to meet before. So it provides opportunities for getting to know people more personally and experiencing the village a bit more. So not only is it great for the community, it's good for our students to get exposure to those types of activities as well. We also wanted to mention that outreach and public education about archaeology and about the Maya in particular, although also just generally about archaeology, are something that the project and project members participate in not only in Belize, but also in other areas. So here you see some images from various project members participating in Archaeology Day activities in San Antonio, Texas, as well as in North Carolina, where a very adventurous tortoise got in the way of the spear throwing activity and kept having to be removed. So these activities are chances for project members to educate the public about, again, archaeology, but also the Maya specifically, and to help spread knowledge and prevent disinformation. Archaeology is one of those topics when there's a lot of false information floating around, and so by reaching out to the public more broadly at these archaeology days, we can help prevent the spread of that misinformation. Project members also participate in other types of outreach activities like the Skype a Scientist program, which is a virtual program where scientists connect into classrooms to talk about topics that they're researching. We in particular wanted to highlight the work of Dr. Whitney Lytle, who is currently the Director of Curation and Education at the Railway Village Museum in Maine. After the 2022 field season, she created a series of short videos designed to introduce archaeology to the public, and you're seeing some of those still images from those videos here. They use sound, videos, and images from MVAP and MVPP excavations and experiences to illustrate archaeological themes. These videos are freely available on YouTube through the Railway Village Museum website and in a number of other locations. These type of outreach activities reach a really broad audience and help to contextualize research about Belize to a more global audience, as well as potentially being useful in classrooms and other educational spaces in Belize itself. While in Belize, project members also participate in giving talks, site tours, and other types of outreach activities. As several project members work at tour sites, most notably Xunantunich, they often speak informally with tour guides and other interested public during the field season as people stop by excavations. This is a great way of getting information out to people who are already interested, as they're already at an archaeological site. We also participate in more formal types of these activities, like the tour that you see here of a cultural organization from Benque who came out to tour the Arenal site a few years ago. Tour guides and other interested folks also are often interested in the non-tourist sites and take that opportunity to come by, so particularly at Arenal, because it is on a road between different locations where people often visit. We've had a lot of folks come out and take tours or bring people with them, even though it's not open to the public, just because they're passing by. So those provide some extra opportunities for those types of engagement in the field as well. Finally, we wanted to highlight the importance of long-term connections with communities and places. So not only as archaeologists is it important for us to have continued and intensive long-term engagement at archaeological sites to find out about them, but it also provides us with opportunities to really create connections within communities. It's very difficult to create connections during short periods of time, and so long-term connections and returning to places is really important for creating a community. This is something that we hear discussed often in conversations with people or other projects, and just people in a community in general, is talking about people who never came back, right? So thus the continuity of a presence in a community is really important for creating those relationships with stakeholders, including landowners and other individuals in the community. So the MVAP and MVPP projects have been operating in the Mopan Valley for over 10 years, while project directors Drs. Capron and Jason Yeager have been working in Belize for even longer. We also have several long-term project members who continue to work in the region and have done so for many years. So these, again, long-term connections create those community connections necessary to do things like run a successful archaeology day, but also to maintain relationships with stakeholders and other interested groups in the community. So in conclusion, archaeology has had a long history of disengagement with local communities, but we can attempt to rectify some of these activities through engagement with the communities and other practices. This is just one small part of decolonial practice in archaeology, but an important one. As many scholars of community engagement point out, broader audiences help recruit people who might want to participate or gain experience in archaeology. We can also help people gain that experience through reducing barriers to participation by working around schedules, removing costs, and providing transportation to excavations when possible. In addition, broadly exposing people in general to archaeology helps prevent the spread of misinformation and pseudo-archaeology, which are very common and themselves help to perpetuate colonial mindsets about archaeology. So thank you all for taking the time to listen to this talk today, and we once again really want to thank the organizers of this conference, and in particular Dr. Rebecca Frida-Juan and Sylvia Batty, whose work we've highlighted here, and has really made a lot of the work that we discussed for these projects as possible. Thanks also to all the folks who we work with on a regular basis, and all of the previous and past MVAP and MVPP staff and students. And thank you all very much for your attention.